Good morning, everyone. This is Chris Linenberger with the Texas Homeless Network out of Austin, Texas. And I just want to welcome you to the March 2016 Bloc Talk. And I'm excited for our presenters that we have on today, just excited to get back into things. So welcome. So, if you've been to our Bloc Talks and you know me, I definitely have to have a monthly meme. And essentially it's, I believe his name is Angry Cat. I don't necessarily remember. But as you guys know, last week was the first day of spring, and it's still, at least here in Austin, has still been a little chilly. I know actually there was a quote-unquote blizzard that hit Amarillo last weekend. So, it's just kind of spring in Texas. Not sure what it's going to be like, but I'm sure pretty soon we'll be up to the 80s, 90s, and low 100s for temperature. So that'll be all fun and good. So just want to go over our agenda for today. I will, as I always do a little bit of housekeeping and some announcements for you guys. And then our monthly spotlight for March is Houston. So we have Gary Greer that is going to be, that has invited some members of the coalition to come and speak to us today from the Coalition for the Homeless of Houston in Harris County. And then after that, of course, one of the biggest things about our Bloc Talk is really giving you guys some time to ask questions and giving our panelists some time to answer those questions. So, so the idea here, of course, is not only to present on the information, but to give you guys some time to digest and to talk about and ask questions about the information. And then I'll do a little close, and I'll send up a follow-up email after this. So around housekeeping, just a couple of items. First of all, your microphone, if you are a participant in this webinar, your microphone will be muted the whole time. And so we do that because when we have anywhere from 20 to 100 people on the line at one time, we can get quite a bit of feedback. So, so you will be muted. Due to that, when it comes time for you to ask questions of our panelists, or if you have any feedback that you want to give myself or Craig that are here at THN coordinating and running this webinar, you can use your chat box or the question box. So at any point in time, I would recommend you opening up that question box and typing in your question at any time during the presentation. That way we can take in those questions and we can kind of put them in a little bit of order so that we can ask our panelists. If you have any other general questions, such as if you cannot hear me or possibly one of our panelists, or have anything such as that, you can always plug that into the chat box. So feel free to use those items. I also want you to know that we do have an added box there called handouts. And so handouts, under handouts, I do have the PowerPoint for both the groups that will be speaking or presenting today. Their handouts are there. So during the webinar, you will be able to see their screen. You will be able to see their PowerPoint, but if you want to upload it and go back at a later date and look at it, feel free to grab it out of the handouts toolbar. Also, and finally, we are recording this webinar. So I believe we have all of our webinars from 2014 and 2015 recorded, as well as the limited number of ones that we've done in 2016. We do record these, and we do put them up on the THN channel of YouTube. So if you ever want to go back and see what's going on around housing issues or possibly work programs around the state of Texas, feel free to comb through our archives of recorded webinars, especially the Bloc Talks, and listen to those. Again, just a reminder that this is the 2016 monthly Bloc Talk. We put this on being Texas Homeless Network. Our job, what we love to do is to provide your communities with as much information as possible regarding working with your community around homelessness. And so the idea is here that we are offering free monthly webinars. And the webinar series in 2016 is focused around housing, and especially talking to the larger COCs around the state and how they do housing and best practices around housing. So again, giving you guys time during these sessions to ask questions. So we do about a 20-minute to 25-minute PowerPoint for the presentation, and then after that we do about a 15-minute Q&A session. So feel free to get ready, get your questions ready. And then in next month, in the month of April, we are planning on talking about homeless practices in Waco, and I am waiting to hear back from Terry about some of those programs. So I will definitely keep you guys updated as we get down an agenda for the month of April. Just a reminder that Texas Homeless Network is a nonprofit membership-based organization. Our job is to provide solutions to ending homelessness to Texas communities through education, resources, and advocacy. If you have any question about us and what we do, please go to our website at THN.org for more information. Other trainings and just brief updates. Other trainings and updates, we do our monthly conversations. These Bloc Talks are the last Tuesday of every month from 2 to 3 p.m. So that happens the last Tuesday of every month. We try to send out the invite at least 2 weeks in advance. And then if you guys are SOAR trainers, or if your communities are enrolling in SOAR or have enrolled in SOAR, we also do webinars around SOAR at the same, not same time, but typically that same week. And so we started those back in October of 2015, and we try to keep those going on a regular basis and try to cover topics that are current to your communities. And then if you would like to receive updates, you can go to our website, go to the website or the update link and click to sign up for any kind of training updates that we do. I just heard that we might be having some technical issues with connection. So it looks like everybody is still on the line that needs to be on the line at this time, and I'm sure people might be reconnecting. So you guys might hear some hiccups in my voice, but reassured we are here. Right now what you're seeing in front of you is just the address for Texas Homeless Network and the general training address. So if you have any training email address, so if you have any questions around trainings that we offer to communities out there or Balance of State or other COCs, please shoot us an email. And then, of course, if you'd like to be a member of THN, you can go to thn.org/membership to get more information around being a member. So for the month of March, we have asked Gary Greer with the Coalition for the Homeless of Houston and Harris County in Houston to talk more about what Houston is doing around housing. And I'm going to unmute Gary, and I am going to give Gary screen control of the PowerPoint. So Gary, can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon. I can hear you. We're breaking up a little bit, but I heard that last statement.
Okay. Well, you're coming in loud and clear, just so you know.
Great, great.
And
good afternoon, everybody.
You're getting screen control right now.
Okay.
We can see loud and clear.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to represent the Coalition for the Homeless. My name is Gary Greer. I'm project manager. I've been with the Coalition for the last 6 years, and prior to the Way Home. That's our collective name for our continuum of care. The Coalition for the Homeless, we serve those who serve the homeless, so we're the lead agency for the continuum of care. And I have the happy task of introducing our experts who are going to spotlight the programs that are used by Search Homeless Services. So we'll have Phoebe Wong, who's Program Manager for Housing Services, and Kathy Crouch, Executive Vice President. And what we'd like to focus on today is our permanent supportive housing and our system change, and then Kathy and Phoebe is. One thing that has been very strong in our systems change is adding coordinated access. So I want to talk a little bit about our coordinated access system to housing. Back before we started organizing as a continuum of care under this directive, it was a haphazard approach on who would get housing. It was, as you can see from this slide, a kind of a zigzag. You'd have to go to many different programs, and it was just by luck of the draw if you got into a housing program. Homeless response system per se, like we have developed with our coordinated access system, there were great programs, but they were working in silos. And so we organized around our continuum of care and developed our action plan. One of the things that was very important was developing what we call our housing models chart. And the housing models chart specify what standards and what our goals are for different housing models like permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, youth and young adult housing, transitional housing. And so we'll focus a little bit on that, and I think Kathy and Phoebe will highlight some of the component parts. This is what access to housing looks today in our Way Home system. We have a variety of points of entry, including targeted coordinated access hubs that include, there are 8 different coordinated access hubs, physical brick and mortar places where people will go and enter the system. We have outreach teams. We have connections with jail inReach, the hospital system, and a call center. Once the client goes through a point of entry, they'll receive an assessment, which uses a housing triage tool and a vulnerability tool to try to match or will match them with the appropriate housing model. Right now, we have both PSH and rapid rehousing fully implemented into our coordinated access system and have closed the side doors. We have 2 years plus in the permanent supportive housing. When the matching happens electronically on our HMIS system, then it is received by the provider for the referral and then acceptance into a housing program. And if there is not a appropriate intervention available at the time, the household will be will be put on our wait list. Just to give you a kind of idea of scope of how we're organized as a continuum of care, we have an intense project management organization, and these different circles here show you all the different initiatives that are working together in our continuum of care as of today. And so you can see the permanent support service, the housing service model, and the PSH pipeline are 2 of the component pieces of our overall project management that work to really an area like Houston. We have assessed over 4,000 clients, that's individuals or households, through the coordinated access system since it was implemented in January of 2014. And there gives you a kind of an idea of the scope. 600 of the clients who have been assessed have left the system, meaning either they self-resolved or they perhaps went into an institution, and they no longer are, we're not able to find them in our system. Give you some of the numbers that we're looking at. Since we organized as a continuum of care and really focused on our plan to, and freshened up our plan to end homelessness, in January 2011, we started some of the initiatives that you saw on the project management chart, the preceding slide. Since that time, there have been 4,318 households that have received a housing placement. And you can see as our housing placements rose, our number of overall homelessness as presenting in the point in time count has decreased by 50% during this 4-year period. And we give a little bit of a breakout of the work that's been done, particularly around veterans and chronic homeless. There's been a 70% drop in chronic homelessness, and that is largely attributed to adoption of best practices, and we're able to track this and be data-driven through our coordinated access system. So this is a little slide of information for me. Right now I'd like to introduce Search Homeless Services and Phoebe and Kathy, who are particularly provide leadership in case management for clients in permanent supportive housing programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gary. I'm Kathy. I'm giving you control right now to the PowerPoint, or to the meeting.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
There we go.
So what Phoebe and I are going to talk about this afternoon for a few minutes is just the evidence-based practices that we're using at Search, practices and programs. So I'm hearing a little bit of background noise.
Muted.
Chris?
Unmuted.
And Chris is so muted him.
Muted.
Okay. And I don't have control of my, I don't have control of the PowerPoint. All right, there, now we're good to go. So about 2 years ago, I was asked to present at a conference on implementing evidence-based practices. And when I got there, what I had been calling evidence-based practices, other people were calling treatments. And so in preparing for this talk, you know, what I came across was EBPs were practices, programs, evidence-based treatment, and then there was best practices. And so what's the difference between all of these? And frankly, it makes my head hurt, like this poor dog on the screen. So evidence-based practices are primarily, so I'll take motivational interviewing for an example. Hundreds and hundreds of clinical trials have been done, research studies, over and over again, and it's a particular model that has been found fairly consistently, or to a large degree, to be effective at doing what it says it's going to do. And the same with cognitive behavioral therapy and other evidence-based practices or treatments that you can, for the most part, really trust that some good solid research has been done, and it can be effective for you also if you use it in the way it was intended. So evidence-based programs are not quite as rigorous in terms of the number of studies and the degree to which they've been really tested, but they have been shown to be consistently reliable across many different programs. And then there's best practices. And so Housing First is a best practice. PSH, ACT is a best practice. IDDT. So many of these are best practices. And if you Google this, some of the times you'll find that one of these will be saying that they're an evidence-based practice instead of a best practice. And if you're applying for a SAMHSA grant, SAMHSA really wants you to use evidence-based programs or practices. And they're going to help you out because they have a really beautiful long list of things that will pass muster with them. And if you write a grant application and say that blah, blah, blah is an EBP, and it's not on their list, you're not going to get funded. So if you Google SAMHSA Registry of Evidence-Based Programs, you will find a whole list of everything that they consider to be an acceptable evidence-based practice or program. And here's kind of the name of it again. So some familiar ones that you may know about are like Choices, Seeking Safety, Mental Health First Aid, Critical Time Intervention, MI, of course. And so then, so now you know where to go, but how do you choose an evidence-based practice for your agency? So one of the things when you think about doing an EBP is it's not just as simple as sending people to training. It really takes a long time. It has to be implemented across the agency, if you will, or you could even choose a smaller subgroup that's going to implement it. But some studies have been done that really show that in order to have this become a part of your culture and really develop some competence among your staff, that it can take up to 17 years. So we've been using MI for 19 years now, and the transtheoretical model or stages of change for 20 years. And I still feel like we're in the middle of implementation a lot of the time. I think it's really important to choose to think about what is the problem that you're trying to address when you start looking at selecting a model. And then what are the values of your organization, and is the model congruent with those values? Sometimes you won't know that. If you have a really a model, if your organization really likes to tell people what to do and feels like you have to be really directive with people, then a client-centered approach like motivational interviewing may not be for you. So it's really important to kind of study this model closely and see, can we go along with this? Looking at what the strengths of the model are and its limitations. Again, it may be hard to know this. You may have to look at a couple of journal articles to get a sense more of what the model is and who it's been used with and how it can work with your agency and your staff and your clients. So here's the bad news. The implementation that really takes a long time has to include a lot of players. Fortunately, and you can see at the bottom of this slide, the feds have made it really a lot easier for us, in that the feds have said, we really want you using evidence-based practices. We want you using best practices. And some of them don't go as far as SAMHSA, but SAMHSA goes as far as to say, if you want our money, you're going to use an evidence-based practice. So that's helpful. And they're willing to give you money to train staff in that approach. You can't just train. People have to get coaching. And whether it's CBT or some of these others, besides motivational interviewing, CBT, DBT, you have to get coaching. And how do you assess your staff and their learning? There has to be a mechanism by which you can do that. Oftentimes there are coding sheets for which fidelity, which have been shown to be reliable and valid for measuring the skill level of the staff. The organization has to really buy in also. And maybe not initially, but over time you've got to get somebody buying into it so that time can be set aside for training and time can be set aside for supervision and coaching. Money can be allocated in the budget for those activities, and that you can really take a look at how is this making a difference in our programming. Some barriers to implementation along the way. You really have to have a champion who has some degree of street cred or power in the organization that can really make this happen, not just today, but year after year after year. Hopefully, as you go throughout, over time, there will be more people in the agency that have serious buy-in to it. You got to have money, which has been a struggle for us, as probably for most of you. You have to have a way to and care about measuring fidelity to the model. Staff turnover is just a perpetual thorn in my side here. You get people who have developed skill, have become competent, and then they leave. And so it's like, in some ways, like you're starting over all the time. You have to get buy-in from staff, and over time it gets a little easier, but there's usually some people who haven't drunk the Kool-Aid even after many months. And I think there's some reasons for that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then you have to plan for you or the champion leaving at some point in time, retiring or moving on, and who's going to be the champion of the EVP going forward after that. So I'm going to turn it over to Phoebe, and she's going to talk about housing PSH as a best practice.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So just to share a bit about search, so we've been doing permanent supportive housing since 1993 through our first Shelter Plus Care grant. And so back then we had, this one housing program serving 32 households. So, 22 years later, now we have 8 permanent supportive housing programs with 31 staff members. And this past year we served about 700 households here in Houston. And so for us, we as an agency has grown quite a bit. And I know the body of knowledge around PSH best practice has also grown a lot through these years. And like Kathy said, we feel like we're still in the middle of implementing this as a best practice here at Search. And so I'd like to share a little bit about our ups and downs in these efforts to implement PSH as a best practice here. And so you'll see on the screen, there's a couple of great free sources that I wanted to point you all to. Many of you are probably familiar with these. So on the left is Corporation for Supportive Housing's toolkit for supportive housing. And then on the right is SAMHSA's toolkit for evidence-based practice around PSH. And so, let me see. So Kathy, if you'll, go to the next slide. So you'll see on the screen here, many of you, again, are probably familiar with these key elements of PSH best practice. There's some slight differences between the two toolkits that were on the screen, but many of these elements are the same. And so I won't go too in-depth talking about these principles. Really, I wanted to focus on how we've tried to implement these at Search over the years. And so if you'll go to the next slide, Kathy. So two of the things that Kathy just shared that were important in implementation were staff and then also organization support. And so I'll talk a little bit about staff first. So, for me as a program manager, my team of staff alone has tripled just over the last 2 years. And so, and Kathy mentioned a little bit about turnover and also just expansion of staff. And so one of the things that I've really found that has been important is, before new staff even set foot in a PSH setting, that I have them read some of the best practices on PSH. So often I'll pull bits of reading from one of the toolkits or both, and then I'll sit down with each staff member and spend a good 30 to 45 minutes just discussing the key elements of best practice until I'm satisfied that they at least have a basic understanding. And so in terms of ongoing supervision around PSH best practice, we, in both one-on-one supervision and also team meetings, we try to incorporate best practice learning and implementation. And so, for example, in one of our PSH programs, the property management has had a tendency of wanting to know personal information about our clients that really has nothing to do with their housing. And so recently in my weekly meetings with this team, we've been discussing quite a bit about this principle of the separation between housing and services, and what types of information our services team should or shouldn't share with property management based on this principle. It's been a great way for our team to really grasp why this principle is essential to the effectiveness of PSH. And then the third piece under staff is staff evaluation. And so to be transparent, we really haven't implemented a formal way to evaluate individual staff members on PSH best practice right now. So really this appears more in informal ways through some feedback on staff performance, sometimes on staff evaluation. So recently I sat in on a staff evaluation that one of our team leads delivered, and during the evaluation he affirmed and acknowledged that staff members' advocacy of their tenants' rights throughout this past year, since that's been such an important part of making sure we're upholding PSH best practice. And so on the screen we have an image of the chapter that's called Training Frontline Staff from the SAMHSA Toolkit. So in that chapter there's been some helpful content and case scenarios that I've pulled before for discussion among staff. And so the next section is organizational support. So as Kathy shared, this is a really key piece beyond just frontline staff that's been important in really growing PSH as a best practice here at Search. And so, in terms of coaching and consultation and just overall training, whenever our local Coalition for the Homeless, or CSH, organizes a training about PSH, we've either highly recommended our staff to attend or we've made it mandatory. And then also over the years, we've invited some different local and also national PSH experts to provide some additional in-house training for our staff. And so one of the things on the horizon for us right now is setting up a monthly coaching call with one of these national experts, Andrea White. And so what we'll be doing is having our PSH program managers and team leads to participate in this monthly coaching call. So we're anticipating it'll be a great space to bring, some tangible challenges and situations that we face, having her as a PSH coach on best practice, so to speak. And then the last piece I wanted to share a little bit about is fidelity scoring and improvement. And so this is really at a programmatic level. And so in April of 2014, here at Search, we started what we called a PSH Fidelity Work Group. And we pulled a staff member, asked a staff member from each of our PSH programs to be a part of this work group. So it's a good mixture of both frontline staff as well as some leadership staff. So we found this mix really helpful. Kathy was talking about staff buy-in earlier, and so we found that this was a really helpful way to make this a collaborative learning opportunity rather than a top-down implementation effort. And so one of the work group's first tasks was to look at the PSH Fidelity Scoring Tool that's in SAMHSA's toolkit. So you'll see an image of it here. This is kind of the abbreviated version. So we had each work group member score their programs using this tool. And so then the work group members shared the scores with each other, and then each of us looked at an area of fidelity that our program scored lower in, and then the work group members took these back to their teams to design a plan to increase that area of fidelity. So as an example, one team realized that they were weaker in the area of consumer-driven services. They saw that they hadn't made a whole lot of intentional efforts to seek the input of residents in designing and providing services. And so that team decided as an action step that they would implement a survey among program residents to elicit feedback about services and the activities that the residents really wanted to see happen. And so these are, some of the biggest pieces of implementing PSH best practice that we've been attempting over these years. And so now I'll pass it back to Kathy, and she's going to talk a little bit about motivational interviewing.
So we don't have a lot of time, and I'm going to race right through this. So when we first considered motivational interviewing, we did so because we were having a problem with substance use, and I kept thinking over the years. So we had some training provided to us, and we had a study group, and then we had a Hogg Foundation grant, and we had some money for coaching and training in there. But no champion showed up, and I kept hoping and hoping that somebody, one of my clinical staff, would take the ball and run with it, and it just never happened. And at some point in time, I decided that if we were going to do this, I was going to have to just bite the bullet and be that champion. And I wound up getting coaching. I started really studying MI quite a bit more. I started co-leading trainings with somebody else in the agency who was strong in MI, and I applied to become an MI trainer, and I got rejected my first year, and then the second time I applied, I was accepted after I'd done a little bit more work. So I've been a trainer now for 6 years. I wound up coaching on our SAMHSA grant and getting training in coding, listening to recordings of our staff, and coding everything that came out of their mouth using a fidelity instrument. And so we've done that for a long time. We did booster sessions every month where people got to practice a little bit more, get more in-depth sort of knowledge around pieces that I could see they were consistently struggling with. And but as far as our other programs, we really didn't have a lot of money. And then periodically some grant money would just show up, and maybe another 4 or 5 people would get coaching. This is the first year, this past year has been the first year that we've had enough money cobbled together from various sources for everybody who's working with clients to get coaching. Everybody right now is in a learning group also that meets once or twice a month, and that's led by in-house people whose skill level has gotten really good. Other ways we've really tried to support MI in the agency is that client-centered is now one of our values, one of the agency values. Staff get evaluated on that twice a year, as how consistent they are with evidence-based, this client-centered approach, not just motivational interviewing, but working with clients in a client-centered way. And there are other ways in which we really try to keep it alive in the agency. MI is not an easy thing to learn. It's quite complicated. And so really, I don't usually expect people to sort of reach this stage of expertise or mastery. But people start out very much as beginners, novices, and then become beginners, competent, and proficient. So what I'm looking for is for people to really become proficient in MI. Competence is great, and then proficiency beyond that. But they don't have one thing just to learn. They have 12 separate tasks that they have to develop competence in and or proficiency. So spirit is the whole philosophy of MI, and it can take a long time, months and months, to really get good at that, to have everything that comes out of your mouth be consistent with MI. These basic client-centered counseling skills can also, again, take months and months and months, even with coaching. And what's important is, that you're not just a passive learner, that you really are an active learner. Where I find staff struggling oftentimes is with this previous slide, which is really struggling with being a beginner or a novice or being an advanced beginner and getting discouraged because it takes a long time to become competent and or proficient. And so then sometimes instead of saying, gee, I'm a beginner, this is really, really hard, but I'm really committed to this, sometimes what happens is they'll say, well, this doesn't work. This doesn't work with our clients. This doesn't work with our particular program. So that's one of the things we often see from some people who are really struggling. Gary wanted us to make some observations about these evidence-based practices and what we've seen works, and I'll just start with the MI. For me, what I can tell, when I can tell it works, is there are two ways. Again, I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of sessions, so at some point when the client-centered approach is solid and when the counseling skills are solid and people are starting to get the strategic part of MI, the discord, the pushback, or the quote resistance that can happen between a case manager and a client, that doesn't happen anymore. Rarely will I ever hear it happen. So that the relationship really shifts and gets quite a bit better. The other thing is that I've noticed after the first year and a half in our SAMHSA grant that the scores, as the coaching scores got better, the skill level in MI got better, the satisfaction scores the satisfaction survey scores that we, all right, let me start again. The satisfaction surveys that we administer to clients, those scores got better. They were happier with their case managers and with the programming. I can't say there's a direct link, but at least anecdotally, that's how it seemed to me. Phoebe?
So I would say in terms of PSH best practice, like Kathy was alluding to, it's hard sometimes with best practice to draw a direct correlation between our practice and client success. But similar to, our fidelity to motivational interviewing as a best practice or as an evidence-based practice, I have seen us grow and staff grow quite a bit in their understanding of PSH best practices. And I've seen that, especially recently, come out in terms of our relationships with property management. So what I've really appreciated about our staff is I've seen them take more and more of an upfront role in educating our property management partners about PSH and really working with them in a way that respects their role, really for us living up to our role, and then that being a really good thing, really effective thing for our clients in PSH.
I think that's it for us.
Unmuted.
Great. Thank you, Kathy and Phoebe. So I want to remind you guys to enter in your questions at this time. So please type them in if you have any questions around the PSH piece or the motivational interviewing. And now's our time to post any questions or ask any questions. All right. I know we had some, I do want to apologize. I know we had some technical issues at the beginning. So you guys might have missed a little bit of Gary speaking. So just a reminder that his handouts, his PowerPoint are underneath the handouts tab. So yes, questions. I know we're coming up to the hour mark here in a little bit, but I wanted to give you guys some time to get anything out there that you want to clarify from either Gary, Phoebe, or Kathy. All right. The first question is for Gary. Gary, do you have any suggestions for communicating across multiple agencies? Gary, you still there?
Yes, I am. I think what has been very helpful for us having the right people in the right room and organizing our projects. That was a slide with the circle. Really have the right input for our work groups. So we have work groups that meet monthly, quarterly. When we're doing implementation, they may meet weekly. So for instance, with our rapid rehousing implementation group, the case managers and the project managers meet weekly to really kind of iron out any issues that we're doing and staff and case manage, so that we're fully utilizing our resource and then maximizing communication. What we do is send out the meeting notice, the minutes, the agenda, and communicate that with each of the different work groups. Monthly, our steering committee, which is the governance for our COC, they meet monthly, and their information is public meetings. It's posted on our website. We have a website that the coalition maintains with the COC page that has all of the minutes, and really communicating that. And to do that effectively, we have 3 monthly newsletters which have a mass distribution. One is geared towards the continuum of care work. One is for advocacy and action, and it highlights some of the work being done in our community by providers. And another one is the coalition's communique, which different training opportunities that the coalition offers. So I hope that answers your question.
That does. That's very helpful, Gary. Also, somebody was asking if you could talk about the Barrier Buster Fund.
We noticed through the work groups, really feedback for the work groups, that we have funding that has restrictions, and you can't always, can't always use the fund to remove some of those barriers. So, for instance, if someone has arrears that they cannot pay, or administrative fee that's required for a lease for a landlord in either a PSH or a scattered site rapid rehousing, the funds that we have through the continuum of care may not pay for that. So we've created a barrier buster to do those type of things, but also additional things. When it comes to housing someone who's been on the streets for a long period of time, they may not have the kind of things that you need to really have a household. You may just have a shell and a place to stay, but you don't have furniture, you don't have a bed, no household goods, food. So the barrier buster is really, we have in the past used it to make furniture packets. We have volunteers that do household welcoming gifts. Now we're getting more with in alignment with the funding to do the things that we need for overcoming the financial barriers, like high deposits, arrears, damage waivers, different things to keep people housed and get them into housing. And I think that has helped us with our outreach to landlords. It's really important in a scarce housing market and a costly housing market to build good relationship with landlords so that you can overcome these barriers.
Great. And where did another follow-up question was, where do you get the funding for that that Barrier Buster Fund?
We have a website. Our Continuum of Care has a website called thewayhomehouston.org. If you search The Way Home Houston, you'll Google it, it'll pull it up. And our Barrier Buster, there's a description of the Barrier Busters, and there's also a place where folks can connect and give direct donations to the Barrier Buster. Church groups, groups that are community groups, neighborhood associations, the business community, they have an opportunity that they want to touch the homeless response system. In past, it may be, okay, I just go out and I give out maybe a sandwich ministry, but the Barrier Bust is really kind of paying into the system, investing in those system best practices. And so that's, I would ask the person who presented the question to take a look at our website, and there's a place on there to ask very specific questions. We'd be happy to answer those.
That'd be great. There was also a question on there about specific software or web-based programs to communicate, and perhaps that's answered as well on your website.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. We have, as both Kathy and Phoebe talked about, there's training, there's coaching, and when we do it on a system level, we want to offer the training. If it's in person, make sure it's offered as frequently and to maximize who can attend. But using a webinar and electronic communication tools is very key and important. So we have really try to invest in doing that. I'm not the right person to talk about the technology. It's just not my area. I know how to use it if somebody's there and directs me, turn this on and use this.
Yeah. Gary, you might have broken up on us again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. We just have a little bit of in and out on your connection for some reason. The other question for Gary was around the HMIS system for the Houston COC. Possibly who pays for the Houston agencies to use that HMIS program? I don't know if you have that information, Gary, or if that's if you have any insight in that.
Can you all hear me? I think I've got maybe a solution for the problem going in and out.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Our HMIS system was awarded a COC grant. We applied for and maintain an HMIS grant that pays for a good fair share of the system so that we do not have to impose cost upon our users. That's the primary funding, and we have also in the past leveraged contractual when there are awards, carve out enough of a percentage so that HMIS can operate. So for instance, if it's an emergency solutions grant, there would be some funding for HMIS, which is part and parcel and required by that program.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation. So we have about 5 more minutes to take questions. Does anybody have, that's some great questions for Gary around the COC piece. Does anybody have any questions for Kathy or for Phoebe?
How do you feel motivational interviewing has affected your agency's relationship with their clients?
Okay, this question just came across. I'm not sure if y'all heard that or not, but Kathy, for you, how do you feel that motivational interviewing has affected your relationship with your clients?
I think I'm going to let Phoebe answer that.
Sure. So yeah, so for me, I was a frontline worker for a number of years, and now as a program manager, I'm definitely seeing, that we, for our case managers who are using MI and PSH, one of the terms in MI is dancing versus wrestling. And so if you're a service provider or you've been in, a situation where you've observed service providers, you can kind of hear the quality of the conversation. And often with folks who are, have been chronically homeless and are dealing with so many challenges, it's easy for the conversation to become like wrestling because we as service providers want so much for them, or our goals may look very different from our clients' goals. So one of the things that I've really noticed is that when I hear conversations between our staff and clients, it really sounds more like dancing. So it really sounds like our case managers are guiding the conversation and helping to facilitate the client sessions, but often it really feels like an art, where they're meeting the client where they are, as well as helping to guide them toward positive change. So it's really been a rapport builder as well as effective in helping our clients make change.
Great. Thank you very much, Phoebe. And also another one to Kathy and Phoebe. How would you suggest promoting or developing a multi-agency collaborative permanent supportive housing pilot? Maybe just some places to start. Kathy or Phoebe, any suggestions?
Yeah. So we have some partnerships, and I think, so we've got a couple, in fact, and I think some of it really has to do with, are there some people you get along with? Do you trust them, that they are kind of like-minded? Do they have similar sorts of practices in their organization? So I think that's a good starting point. Have they been in trouble with the feds? Do they get findings? Those are the kind of people you may not want to be playing with. And so do they like learning? Are they interested in evidence-based practices or best practices? And are those kinds of things important to them? So are you like-minded in a number of different ways? Phoebe, what would you add to that? Hello?
Phoebe, are you there?
I think we lost
Hello?
her.
Hello,
Yep.
can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
So Phoebe, can you add to that?
Sure. So can you repeat the original question just so that I make sure I'm speaking to it?
Yes. How would you suggest promoting developing a multi-agency collaborative permanent supportive housing pilot?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so sometimes for us in the past, sometimes the opportunity presents itself, and then we make a decision whether we go for it or not. Sometimes also we've gone after these partnerships. There are a couple of PSH programs that I'm overseeing where it is a pretty big collaborative effort among some different entities. And what we're finding is, what's exciting and also challenging is that often it's been we've provided kind of the PSH service provision for these partnerships, and the partners that were involved in maybe healthcare partners providing kind of an integrated care partnership, or it might be other service providers providing, additional either mental health services or that kind of thing. And so, yeah, for us, we've really been the champion of the PSH model within these partnerships. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, we've seen the strength in doing partnerships across different agencies.
That's great. So really collaborating across different agencies and really making sure that you're on the same page and those agencies are after the same goals, that you really have some kind of program drive in the right direction, sounds like.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it is 3 o'clock, after a couple minutes after 3 o'clock. And first of all, I want to thank Gary and Kathy and Phoebe for being on the call today. Thank you for being here and preparing to talk with us and sharing your information from Houston with us. I also want to thank all the attendees for being on the call, and that I'm sorry about a couple of the connection issues. Well, it seems like it's a heavy traffic time for some reason this Tuesday, and so we're just getting a lot of spikes in the usage of the internet. Really, just to say thank you. Also, when you do close down or I shut off this webinar, you will get an evaluation. I don't know if I updated the evaluation to say the month of March. It might actually still say February. But please give us some feedback and what you thought about the presentation and other areas you would like to present about how they do housing or their kind of housing programs. So, and just remember, we will be popping this up on our YouTube channel within probably 24 to 48 hours so that you can revisit it if you like, or send the link on to coworkers. So thank you guys very much, and thank you Kathy and Gary and Phoebe for presenting today. And with that, I'll be signing off. Thank you guys.